All right. Good morning, everybody. We are starting today with Vishnu Mahapurana, Book 5, Chapter 31. So currently, where we left off at the end of the last chapter, Krishna and his wife Satyabhama are in Svargaloka, the celestial kingdom of Indra and his devas. And they just had a fight over the Parijata tree in Indra's garden. And they ended their fight. Indra surrendered, and they're now talking. Keshava, being thus eulogized by the Raja of the Devas, smiled and spake gravely to him in reply. You are Indra, said he, the Raja of the Celestials. We are but mortals, O Lord of the world. You must pardon, therefore, the offense that I have committed. Let this Parijata tree be taken to its appropriate situation. I removed it in compliance with the words of Satya. Receive back also this, your thunderbolt cast at me, for this is your proper weapon, the destroyer of your foes. Indra answered and said, You beguilest us, O Lord, in calling thyself immortal, but we know you to be the Lord, although we are not endowed with your subtlety of discernment. You are that you are, engaged in the act of preservation of the earth. You extractest the thorns implanted in her bosom, destroyer of the demons. Let this Parijata tree be transferred to Dwaraka, and it shall remain upon earth as long as you abidest in the world of mortals. Hari, having assented to the proposal of Indra, returned to earth, hymned by attendant sages, saints, and quiristers of heaven. When Krishna arrived over Dwaraka, descending to it from the sky, he blew his shell and delighted all the inhabitants with the sound. Then, alighting from Garuda, he proceeded with Satyabhama to her garden, and there planted the great Parijata tree, the smell of which perfumed the earth for 3 furlongs, and an approach to which enabled everyone to recollect the events of a prior existence. So that on beholding their faces in that tree, all the Yadavas contemplated themselves in their original celestial forms. In other words, that gazing upon the tree gives you visions of your own past lives. Then Krishna took possession of the wealth, elephants, horses, and women which he had recovered from Naraka, and which had been brought to Dwaraka by the servants of the demon. And at an auspicious season, he espoused all the maidens whom Naraka had carried off from their friends. At one and the same moment he received the hands of all of them, according to the ritual, in separate mansions. 16,100 was the number of the maidens, and into so many different forms did Madhusudana multiply himself, so that every one of the damsels thought that he had wedded her in his single person, and the creator of the world Hari, the assumer of universal shape, abode severally in the dwelling of each of these his wives. Chapter 32. Parashara said, I have enumerated to you Pradyumna and the other sons of Rukmini. Satyabhama bore Bhanu and Bhairika. The sons of Rohini were Deeptimat, Temrapakshi, and others. The powerful Shamba and other sons were born of Jambavati. Bhadravinda and other valiant youths were the sons of Nagnajiti. Shavya, Krishna's wife Shavya, also named Mitravinda, had several sons, of whom Sangramajit was the chief. Vrakka and others were begotten by Hari on Madri. Lakshmana had Gatavrat and others, and Sruta and others were the sons of Kalindi. Krishna had sons also by his other wives, in all 180,000. The eldest of all was Pradyumna, the son of Rukmini. His son, Pradyumna's son, was Aniruddha, from whom Vraja was born. His mother, Vraja's mother, was Usha, the daughter of Barna and granddaughter of Bali, whom Aniruddha won in war. On that occasion, a fierce battle took place between Hari and Shankara, in which the 1,000 arms of Bana were lopped away by the chakra of Hari. Maitreya said, "How happened it, venerable Brahman, that a contest on account of Usha arose between Shiva and Krishna? And in what manner did Hari cut off the 1,000 arms of Bana? This, illustrious sir, you are able to narrate." Parashara said, "Usha, the daughter of Bana, having seen Parvati sporting with her lord Shambhu, was inspired with a wish for similar dalliance. The beautiful Gauri, who knows the hearts of all, said to Usha, 'Do not grieve, you shall have a husband.' But when will this be?" thought Usha to herself. "And who will be my lord?" On which Parvati continued, answering her thoughts, "He who shall appear to you, princess, in a dream on the 12th lunation of the light half of Vaishakha, he shall be your husband." Accordingly, as the goddess had foretold, on that lunar day, a youth appeared to Usha in a dream, of whose person she became enamored. When she woke and no longer perceived him, she was overcome with sorrow, and unrestrained by modesty demanded of her companion whither he had gone. The companion and friend of the princess was Chitralekha, the daughter to Kubhanda, the minister of Bana. "Of whom do you speak?" inquired she of Usha. But the princess, recollecting herself, was ashamed and remained silent. At length, however, Chitralekha conciliated her confidence, and she related to her what had passed, and what the goddess had foretold, and she requested her friend to devise some means of uniting her with the person whom she had beheld in her dream. Chitralekha then delineated the most eminent gods, demons, spirits, and mortals, and showed them to Usha. In other words, showing her images of their appearance, to ask Usha if she recognized any of them from the dream. Putting aside the portraits of gods, spirits, snake gods, and demons, the princess selected those of mortals, as most resembling the man she had dreamed of, and amongst them, the heroes of the races of Andhaka and Vrishni. When she came to the likenesses of Krishna and Rama, she was confused with shame. From the portrait of Pradyumna, she modestly averted her eyes. But the moment she beheld the picture of Pradyumna's son, the object of her passion, her eyes wide expanded and all her bashfulness was discarded. This is he, said she to Chitralekha, and her friend, who was endowed with magic power, bade her be of good cheer, and set off through the air to Dvaraka. Chapter 33. Before this took place, Bana had been engaged in the adoration of Triambaka, the three-eyed god Shiva, and had thus prayed to him, "I am humiliated, O Lord, by the possession of 1,000 arms and a state of peace. Let some hostilities ensue, in which I may derive some advantage from their possession. Without war, what is the use to these arms? They are but a burden to me." Shankara replied, "When thy peacock banner shall be broken, you shall have war, the delight of the evil spirit that feast on the flesh of man." Bana, pleased by this promise, proffered his thanks to Shambhu and returned to his palace, where he found his standard broken, at which his joy was increased. At that time, the nymph Chitralekha returned from Dvaraka, and by the exercise of her magic power brought Aniruddha along with her. The guard of the inner apartments, discovering him there with Usha, reported it to the king, who immediately sent a body of his followers to seize the prince. But the valiant youth, taking up an iron club, slew his assailants, on which Bana mounted his car, advanced against him, and endeavored to put him to death. Finding, however, that Aniruddha was not to be subdued by prowess, he followed the counsel of his minister and brought his magical faculties into the conflict, by which he succeeded in capturing the Yadu prince and binding him in serpent bonds, or binding him with the Naga Pasha, a binding weapon of the Nagas. When Aniruddha was missed from Dvaravati, and the Yadavas were inquiring of one another whither he had gone, Narada came to them and told them he was a prisoner of Bana, having been conveyed by a female possessed of magic faculties to Sonitapura. Sonitapura being Banasura's capital city. It's in what is today Assam, in the far east, northeast of India. When they heard this, they were satisfied, for they had imagined he had been taken away by the Devas in reprisal for the whole episode of the Parijata tree. Krishna therefore immediately summoned Garuda, who came at his wish, and mounting upon him, along with Bala and Pradyumna, he set off for the city of Varna. On their approach to the city, they were opposed by the spirits who attend on Rudra, because the Bhagavatam, which we have read through, described this in some more detail, but Banasura was a great devotee of Shiva and had earned a boon from Shiva, which was that Shiva would always protect his city. That's why some of Shiva's servants are here, opposing their approach to the city as enemies. But these were soon destroyed by Hari, and he and his companions reached the vicinity of the town. Here mighty fever, an emanation from Maheshwara, a fever spirit having 3 feet and 3 heads, fought desperately with Vishnu in defense of Varna. Baladeva, upon whom his ashes were scattered, was seized with burning heat, and his eyelids trembled, but he obtained relief by clinging to the body of Krishna. Contending thus with the divine holder of the bow, the fever emanating from Shiva was quickly expelled from the person of Krishna by a counter fever which he himself engendered. Brahma, beholding the impersonated malady, bewildered by the beating inflicted by the arms of the deity, entreated the latter to desist, and Madhusudana refrained and absorbed back into himself the fever he had created. The rival fever then departed, saying to Krishna, "Those men who call to memory the combat between us shall be ever exempt from febrile disease." Next, Vishnu overcame and demolished the 5 fires, more occult defenses of Shonitapura, and with perfect ease annihilated the army of the Danavas. Then the son of Bali, Varna, with the whole of the Daitya host, assisted by Shankara and Kartikeya, fought with Shauri. A fierce combat took place between Hari and Shankara. All the regions shook, scorched by their flaming weapons, and the celestials felt assured that the end to the universe was at hand. Govinda, with the weapon of yawning, set Shankara agape, casting a spell of sleepiness over him. And then the demons and demigods attendant upon Shiva were destroyed on every side. For Hara, overcome with incessant yawning, sat down in his car and was unable longer to contend with Krishna, whom no acts affect. The deity of war, Kartikeya, wounded in the arm by Garuda, struck by the weapons of Pradyumna and disarmed by the shout of Hari, took to flight. Varna, when he saw Shankara disabled, the Daityas destroyed, Guha fled, and Shiva's followers slain, advanced on his vast car, the horses to which were harnessed by Nandisha, to encounter Krishna and his associates Bala and Pradyumna. The valiant Balabhadra, attacking the host of Varna, wounded them in many ways with his arrows and put them to a shameful rout. And their sovereign beheld them dragged about by Rama with his plowshare, or beaten by him with his club, or pierced by Krishna with his arrows. He therefore attacked Krishna, and a fight took place between them. They cast at each other fiery shafts that pierced through their armor, but Krishna intercepted with his arrows those of Varna and cut them to pieces. Varna nevertheless wounded Keshava, and the wielder of the chakra wounded Varna, and both desirous of victory, and seeking enraged the death of his antagonist, hurled various missiles at each other. When a seemingly infinite number of arrows had been cut to pieces, and the weapons began to be exhausted, Krishna resolved to put Varna to death. The destroyer of the demon host therefore took up his discus Sudarshana, blazing with the radiance of 100 suns. As he was in the act of casting it, the mystical goddess Kortavi, who was herself the magic lore of the demons, appeared standing naked before him. Kortavi is a portion of the goddess Rudrani, the tutelary goddess of the Daityas. She is called a mantra mayi, or a illusory goddess composed of mantras. Seeing her before him, Krishna, with unclosed eyes or undiluted eyes, cast Sudarshana to cut off the arms of Bana. The discus, dreaded in its flight by the whole of the weapons of the demons, lopped off successively the numerous arms of the Asura. Beholding Krishna with the discus again in his hand, as it returns to his hand after striking its target, and preparing to launch it once more for the total demolition of Bana, Tripurantaka, a name of Shiva, respectfully addressed Krishna. The husband of Uma, seeing the blood streaming from the severed arms of Bana, approached Govinda to solicit a suspension of hostilities, and said to him, Krishna, Krishna, Lord of the world, I know you, first of spirits, the supreme Lord, of infinite felicity, without beginning or end, and beyond all things. This sport of universal being in which you take the persons of God, animals, and men, is a subordinate attribute of thy energy. Be propitious, therefore, O Lord, unto me. I have given Bana assurance of safety. Do not you falsify that which I have spoken. He has grown old in devotion to me. Let him not incur thy displeasure. The Daitya has received a boon from me, and therefore I deprecate thy wrath. When he had concluded, Govinda, dismissing his resentment against the Asura, looked graciously on Umapati, the wielder of the trident, and said to him, Since you, Shankara, have given a boon unto Bana, let him live. From respect to your promises, my discus is arrested. The assurance of safety granted by you is granted also by me. You are fit to apprehend that you are not distinct from me. That which I am, you are, and that also is this world, with its gods, demons, and humankind. Men contemplate distinctions because they are stupefied by ignorance. In other words, distinctions between Krishna and Shiva. So saying, Krishna went to the place where the son of Pradyumna was confined. The snakes that bound him were destroyed, being blasted by the breath of Garuda, and Krishna placing him along with his wife, upon his wife, of course, being Usha, the daughter of Bana, upon the celestial bird, returned with Pradyumna and Rama to Dvaraka. Chapter 34. Maitreya said, Of a truth, the divine Shri, having assumed a mortal body, performed great achievements. In his easy victories over Shakra and Shiva and all their attendant divinities. I am now desirous to hear from you, illustrious sage, what other mighty exploit the humiliator of the prowess of the celestials performed. Parashara said, Hear, excellent Brahman, with reverent attention, an account of the burning of Varanasi by Krishna, in the course of his relieving the burdens of the earth. There was a Vasudeva who was called Paundraka. Paundraka because he was the king of Pundra. And who, though not the Vasudeva, was flattered by ignorant people as the descended deity until he fancied himself to be the Vasudeva who had come down upon earth. Losing all recollection of his real character, he assumed the emblems of Vishnu and sent an ambassador to the magnanimous Krishna with this message. Relinquish, you foolish fellow, the discus. Lay aside all my insignia, my name, and the character of Vasudeva, and come and do me homage, and I will vouchsafe you means of subsistence. At which Janardana laughed and replied, Go, messenger, back to Paundraka, and say to him from me, I will dispatch to you my emblem the discus without fail. You will rightly apprehend my meaning and consider what is to be done, for I shall come to thy city, bringing the discus with me, and shall undoubtedly consign it to you. If you will command me to come, I will immediately obey and be with you tomorrow. There shall be no delay, and having sought thy asylum, I will so provide, O king, that I shall never more have anything to dread from you. So saying, he dismissed the ambassador to report these words to his sovereign, and summoning Garuda, mounted him, and set off for the city of Paundraka. When the king of Kashi heard of the preparations of Keshava, he sent his army to the aid of Paundraka, himself bringing up the rear, and with the force of the king of Kashi and his own troops, Paundraka the false Vasudeva marched to meet Krishna. Hari beheld him afar off, standing in his car, holding a discus, a club, a mace, a scimitar, and a lotus in his hands, ornamented with a garland of flowers, bearing a bow and having his standard made of gold. He had also the Shri mark delineated on his breast. He was dressed in yellow garments and decorated with earrings and a tiara. When the god whose standard is Garuda beheld him, he laughed with a deep laugh and engaged in conflict with a hostile host of cavalry and elephants, fighting with swords, scimitars, maces, tridents, spears, and bows. Showering upon the enemy the shafts from his Sharanga bow and hurling at them his mace and discus, he quickly destroyed both the army of Paundraka and that of the king of Kashi. He then said to the former, to Paundraka, who was foolishly wearing his emblems, Paundraka, you desired me by your envoy to resign to you all my insignia. I now deliver them to you. Here is my discus, here is my mace, and here is Garuda. Let him mount upon thy standard. Thus speaking, he let fly the discus and the mace, by which Paundraka was cut to pieces and cast on the ground, whilst the Garuda on his banner was demolished by the real Garuda of Vishnu. The people, beholding this sight, exclaimed, Alas, alas, referring, of course, to the followers of Paundraka. But the valiant king of Kashi, adhering to the imposture of his friend, continued the conflict till Shri decapitated him with his arrows, shooting his head into the city of Kashi, to the marvel of all the inhabitants. Having thus slain Paundraka and the king of Kashi with all their followers, Shri returned to Dwaraka, where he lived in the enjoyment of heavenly delights. When the inhabitants of Kashi saw the head of their king shot into their city on an arrow, they were much astonished and wondered how it could have happened and by whom the deed could have been done. Having ascertained that the king had been killed by Krishna, the son of the monarch of Kashi, named Prince Sudakshina, together with the priest of the family, propitiated Shankara, and that deity, well pleased to be adored in the sacred place of Avimukta, desired the prince to demand a boon, on which he prayed and said, O Lord, mighty God, through thy favor, let a mystic spirit arise to destroy Krishna, the murderer of my father. It shall be so, answered Shankara, and from out of the southern fire upsprang a vast and formidable female spirit, a kritya, or magical creation. Like a flame out of fire, blazing with ruddy light, and with fiery radiance streaming amidst her hair. Angrily she called upon Krishna, and departed to Dwaraka, where the people beholding her were struck with dismay, and fled for protection to Madhusudana, the refuge of all worlds. The wielder of the discus, knowing that the fiend had been produced by the son of the king of Kashi, through his adoration of the deity whose emblem is a bull, and being engaged in sportive amusements and then playing at dice, said to his discus, Kill this fierce creature, whose tresses are of pleated flame. Accordingly, Sudarshana, the chakra of Vishnu, immediately attacked the fiend, fearfully enwreathed with fire, and wearing tresses of pleated flame. Terrified at the might of Sudarshana, the creation of Maheshvara awaited not his attack, but fled with speed, pursued by him with equal velocity, until she reached Varanasi, repelled by the superior might of the discus of Vishnu. The army of Kashi and the host of the demigods attendant upon Shiva, armed with all kinds of weapons, then sallied out to oppose the Chakram. But skilled in the use of arms, Sudarshana composed the whole of the forces by his radiance, and then set fire to the city, in which the magic power of Shiva had concealed herself, by which we mean the Kritya, the fire demoness. Thus was Varanasi burnt, with all its princes and their followers, inhabitants, elephants, horses and men, treasures and granaries, houses, palaces, and markets. The whole of a city that was inaccessible to the gods was thus wrapped in flames by the discus of Hari and was totally destroyed. The discus then, with unmitigated wrath and blazing fiercely, and far from satisfied with the accomplishment of so easy a task, returned to the hand of Vishnu. Chapter 35. Maitreya said, I have a great desire to hear, excellent Brahman, some further account of the exploits of Balarama. You have related to me his dragging the Yamuna and other mighty deeds, but you can tell me, venerable sir, some other of his acts. Parashara said, attend, Maitreya, to the achievements performed by Rama, who is the eternal, illimitable Shesha, the upholder of the earth. At the Swayamvara, the choice of a husband, by the daughter of Duryodhana, the princess was carried off by the hero Shambha, the son of Jambavati. Being pursued by Duryodhana, Karna, Bhishma, Drona, and other celebrated chiefs who were incensed at his audacity, Shamba was defeated and taken prisoner. When the Yadavas heard of the occurrence, their wrath was kindled against Duryodhana and his associates, and they prepared to take up arms against them. But Baladeva, in accents interrupted by the effects of inebriety, in other words, that he, as he very often was drunk, forbade them, and said, I will go alone to the sons of Kuru. They will liberate Shamba at my request. Parashara said, accordingly, he went to the city of the elephant, Hastinapura, but took up his abode in a grove outside the town, and did not enter the town. When Duryodhana and the rest heard that he had arrived there, they sent him a cow, a present of fruits and flowers, and water. Bala received the offering in the customary form and said to the Kauravas, Ugrasena commands you to set Shamba at liberty. When Duryodhana, Karna, Bhishma, Drona, and the others heard this, they were very angry, and Vahlika and other friends of the Kauravas who looked upon the Yadu race as not entitled to regal dignity, said to the wielder of the club, what is this, Balabhadra, that you have uttered? What Yadava shall give orders to the chiefs of the family of Kuru? If Ugrasena issues his mandates to the Kauravas, then we must take away the white umbrella that he has usurped, and which is fit only for kings. Depart, therefore, Balarama. You are entitled to our respect, but Shamba has been guilty of improper conduct, and we will not liberate him, either at Ugrasena's commands or yours. The homage that is due to us, their superiors, by the Kukkura and Andhaka tribes, may not be paid by them, but whoever heard of a command issued by a servant to his master? Elevation to an equal seat has rendered you arrogant. We have committed a great mistake in neglecting, through our friendship for you, the policy that teaches the danger of treating the abject with deference. Our sending you today a respectful present was an intimation of personal regard, which it was neither fit for our race to have proffered, nor for yours to have expected. Having thus spoken, the Kuru chiefs, unanimously refusing to set the son of Hari at large, immediately returned into the city. Bala, roiling with intoxication and the wrath with their contemptuous language had excited, struck the ground furiously with his heel so that it burst to pieces with a large sound that reverberated through the regions of space. His eyes reddened with rage, and his brow was curved with frowns, as he exclaimed, what arrogance is this? In such vile and pithless creatures, the sovereignty of the Kauravas as well as our own is the work of fate, whose decree it also is that they now disrespect or disobey the commands of Ugrasena. Indra may of right give his orders to the Devas, and Ugrasena exercises equal authority with the Lord of Sachi. Fie upon pride that boasts a throne, the leavings of 100 mortals. Is not he the sovereign of the earth, the wives of whose servants adorn themselves with the blossoms of the Parijata tree? Ugrasena shall be the undisputed king of kings, for I will not return to his capital until I have rid the world wholly of the sons of Kuru. I will destroy Karna, Duryodhana, Drona, Bhishma, Bahlika, Dushasana, Bhurishravas, Somadatta, Shalya, Bhima, Arjuna, Yudhishthira, the twins, and all the other vile descendants of Kuru, with their horses, elephants, and chariots. I will rescue the hero Shamba from captivity, and carry him along with his wife to Dwaraka, where I shall again behold Ugrasena and the rest of my kin. Or, authorized by the king of the Devas to remove the burdens of the earth, I will take this capital of the Kauravas, with all the sons of Kuru, and cast the whole city of the elephant into the Bhagirathi river. So saying, the wielder of the club, Baladeva, his eyes red with rage, plunged the blade of his plowshare downwards beneath the ramparts of the city, and drew them towards him. When the Kauravas beheld Hastinapura tottering, they were much alarmed, and called loudly on Rama, saying, Rama, Rama, hold, hold, suppress your wrath, have mercy on us. Here is Shamba, and his wife also, delivered up to you. Forgive our sins committed in ignorance of thy wondrous power. Accordingly, issuing hurriedly from the city, the Kauravas delivered Shamba and his bride to the mighty Balarama, who, bowing to Bhishma, Drona, and Kripa, who addressed him in conciliatory language, said, I am satisfied, and so desisted. The city still bears the marks of the shock it received, even to the present day. Such was the might of Rama, proving both his strength and prowess. The Kauravas, then offering homage to Shamba and to Bala, dismissed the former with his wife and a bridal portion. Bridal portion meaning all of her property and wealth that she is taking with her. Chapter 36. Here also, Maitreya, another exploit performed by the mighty Balarama. The great Asura, the foe to the friends of the gods, Naraka, had a friend of exceeding prowess in the Vanara, or the monkey, named Dvivida, who was animated by implacable hostility against the deities, and vowed to revenge on the whole of them the destruction of Naraka by Krishna, at the instigation of the Raja of the Celestials, by preventing yajnas and effecting the annihilation of the mortal sphere. So this is a Vanara, or the Vanaras are the monkey race, the most famous member of whom the most famous Vanara is Hanuman, of course. Dvivida is a very powerful but evil one of the same race. Blinded by ignorance, Dvivida accordingly interrupted all religious rites, subverted all religious observances, and occasioned the death of living beings. He set fire to the forests, to villages and to towns. Sometimes he overwhelmed cities and hamlets with falling rocks, or lifting up mountains in the waters. He cast them into the ocean. Then, taking his place amidst the deep, he agitated the waves until the foaming sea arose above its confines and swept away the villages and cities situated upon its shores. Dvivida also, who could assume what shape he would, enlarged his bulk to an immense size, and rolling and tumbling amidst the cornfields, he crushed and spoiled the harvests. The whole world, disordered by this iniquitous monkey, was deprived of sacred study and religious rites, and was greatly afflicted. On one occasion, Halayudha, one of the many names of Balarama, was drinking in the groves of Revata, along with the illustrious Revati and other beautiful females. So the groves of Revata mean the groves of his wife, Revati. And the distinguished Yadu, in whose praises songs were sung and who was preeminent among graceful and sportive women, resembled Kubera, god of riches, in his palace. Whilst he was thus engaged, the monkey Dvivida came there, and stealing the plowshare and the club of Baladeva, grinned at and mocked him, and laughed at the women, and threw over and broke the cups filled with wine. Balarama, becoming angry at this, threatened the monkey, but the latter disregarded his menaces and made a chattering noise, on which Bala, starting up, seized his club in wrath. In other words, seized the club that the monkey held. And the monkey laid hold of a large rock, which he hurled at the hero. Bala casting his club at it, evidently having pulled it from the monkey's grasp, casting his club at it as it neared him, broke it into 1,000 fragments, which together with the club fell upon the ground. Beholding the club prostrate, the monkey sprang over it. Again, they keep fighting over the club, trying to get the club from each other. And the monkey struck the Yadava violently on the breast with his paws. Bala replied with a blow of his fist upon the forehead of Dvivida, which felled him vomiting blood, and he fell lifeless to the earth. The crest of the mountain on which he fell was splintered into 100 pieces by the weight of his body, as if the thunderer had shivered it with his bolt. The gods threw down a shower of flowers upon Rama, and approached him, and praised him for the glorious feat he had performed. Well has the world been freed, said they, by your prowess, O hero, of this vile ape, who was the ally of the enemy of the gods. Then they and their attendant spirits returned well pleased to heaven. Many such inimitable deeds were wrought by the illustrious Baladeva, the impersonation of Shesha, the supporter of the earth. Chapter 37. In this manner did Krishna, assisted by Baladeva, destroy demons and iniquitous monarchs for the good of the earth. And along with Palguna also did he relieve earth of her load by the death of innumerable hosts. Palguna, of course, being a name of Arjuna. Having thus lightened the burdens of the earth and slain many unrighteous princes, he exterminated by pretext of an imprecation denounced by Brahmanas his own Yadava race. Then, quitting Dwaraka and relinquishing his mortal being, the self-born re-entered with all his emanations his own sphere of Vishnu, with Balarama, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and the rest. Maitreya said, "Tell me how Janardana effected the destruction of his own race under the by the means of a Brahmanical curse, and in what manner he relinquished his mortal body." Parashara said, "At the holy Tirtha of Pindaraka, which is a village still held in veneration, a holy village still in modern India. It's in the state of Gujarat. Vishvamitra, Kanva, and the great sage Narada were observed by some boys of the Yadu tribe. Giddy with youth and influenced by predestined results, or in other words, drawn by the course of their karma, they dressed and adorned Shamba, the son of Jambavati, as a damsel, and conducting her to the sages, they addressed them with their usual remarks of reverence and said, "What child shall this woman, the wife of Bhabru, who is anxious to have a son, will she have a son or a daughter?" The sages, who were possessed of divine wisdom, were very angry to find the boys thus attempting to trick them, and said, "She will bring forth a club that shall crush the whole of the Yadava race." The boys thus spoken to by the sage went and related all that had occurred to Ugrasena, and as foretold, a club was produced from the belly of Shamba. Ugrasena had the club, which was of iron, ground to dust and thrown into the sea, but the particles of dust there washed ashore with the returning tide and sprang up as rushes, or reeds of iron, upon the beach. The term in Sanskrit is eraka, eraka grass, made of strange cursed iron. There was one part of the iron club which was like the blade of a lance, and which the Antakas could not break. This, when thrown into the sea, was swallowed by a fish, and the fish was caught. The iron spike was extracted from its belly, and was eventually taken by a hunter named Jara. The all-wise and glorious Madhusudana did not think fit to counteract what had been predetermined by fate. Then there came to Keshava, when he was private and alone, a messenger from the gods, who addressed him with reverence and said, I am sent to you, O Lord, by the deities, and do you hear what Indra, together with the Vishvas, Maruts, Adityas, Sadhyas, and Rudras, respectfully represents? More than 100 years have elapsed since you, in favor to the gods, descended upon earth for the purpose of relieving it of its load. The demons have been slain, and the burden of earth has been removed. Now let the immortals once again behold their monarch in heaven. A period exceeding a century has passed. Now, if it be thy pleasure, return to Svarga. This is the solicitation of the celestials. But should such not be thy will, then remain here as long as it may be desirable to thy dependents. To this Krishna replied, all that you have said I am well aware. I am well aware of, and the destruction of the Yadavas by me has already commenced. The burdens of the earth are not removed until the Yadavas are extirpated. I will effect this also in my Avatarana, and quickly, for it shall come to pass in 7 nights. When I have restored the land of Dwaraka to the ocean, and annihilated the race of Yadu, I will proceed to the mansions of the immortals. Apprise the gods that having abandoned my human body, and accompanied by Sankarshana, I will then return to them. The tyrants that oppressed the earth, Jarasandha and the rest, have been killed, and a youth even of the race of Yadu is no less than they an encumbrance. And therefore I have taken away this great weight upon earth. I will return to protect the sphere of the celestials. Say this to them. Parashara continued. The messenger of the gods, having received this reply, bowed and took his heavenly course to the king of the gods. The mighty Krishna now beheld signs and portents, both in earth and heaven, prognosticating day and night the ruin of Dwaraka. Showing these to the Yadavas, he said, see, behold these fearful phenomena. A list of what exactly these portents were is given not in any of the Puranas, but in the Mahabharata. Things such as dreadful figures of death personified, haunting every house, coming and going no one knows how, and being invulnerable to weapons. Strong hurricane winds blowing, a multiplication of large rats in the city, infesting the roads and houses, and biting people in their sleep, and many other such extremely inauspicious portents are specifically detailed in the Mahabharata. Oh, I see, Radhaji, we're in Vishnu Purana, Book 5, Chapter 37. So pointing out these signs to the Yadavas, Krishna said, see, behold these fearful phenomena. Let us hasten to Prabhasha to avert these omens. When he had thus spoken to the eminent Yadava, the illustrious Uddhava saluted and said to him, tell me, O Lord, what it is proper that I should do, for it seems to me that you will destroy all this race. The signs that are manifest declare nothing less than the annihilation of the tribe. Then Krishna replied to him, do you go by a celestial route, which my favor shall provide you, to the holy place Badrikashrama, in the Gandhamadana mountain, the shrine of Naranarayana, and on that spot, sanctified by them, you, by meditating on me, shall obtain perfection through my favor. When the race of Yadu shall have perished, I shall proceed to heaven, and the ocean shall inundate Dwaraka when I have quitted it. Parashara continued. Accordingly, Uddhava, thus instructed by Keshava, saluted him with veneration, and departed to the shrine of Naranarayana. Then the Yadavas ascended their rapid chariots and drove to Prabhasa, along with Krishna, Rama, and the rest of their chiefs. They bathed there, and excited by Vasudeva, the Kukkuras and Andhakas indulged in liquor. As they drank, the destructive flame of dissension was kindled amongst them by mutual collision and fed with the fuel of abuse. Infuriated by the divine influence, they fell upon one another with missile weapons, and when those were expended, they had recourse to the iron rushes growing nigh. The rushes in their hands became like thunderbolts, and they struck one another with their fatal blows. Pradyumna, Shamba, Kritavarman, Satyaki, Aniruddha, Prutu, Viprutu, Chatuvarman, Charuka, Akrura, and many others struck one another with the rushes, which had assumed the hardness of diamond. Keshava interposed to prevent them, but they thought that he was taking part with each severally, and continued the conflict. Krishna, then enraged, took up a handful of rushes himself to destroy them, and the rushes became a club of iron. And with this he slew many of the murderous Yadavas, while others fighting fiercely put an end to one another. The chariot of the holder of the chakra, named Jaitra, was quickly carried off by his swift steeds and swept away by the sea, in the sight of Daruka the charioteer. The discus, the club, the bow, the quiver, the shell, and the sword of Keshava, having circumambulated their lord, flew along the path of the sun. In other words, left this world and are already returning to heaven. In a short time, there was not a single Yadava left alive there, except the mighty Krishna and Daruka, his charioteer. Going towards Rama, who was sitting at the foot of a tree, they beheld a large serpent coming out of his mouth. Having issued from his mouth, the mighty snake proceeded towards the ocean, hymned by saints and by other great serpents. Bringing an offering of respect, Ocean himself came to meet him, or Samudra Deva. And then the majestic being, adored by attendant Nagas, entered into the waters of the deep. Beholding the departure of the spirit of Balabhadra from his body, Keshava said to Daruka, "All this is to be related by you to Vasudeva and Ugrasena. Go and inform them of the departure of Balabhadra and the destruction of the Yadavas. Also that I shall engage in religious meditation and quit this body. Apprise Ahuka and all the inhabitants of Dwaraka." These being the women, children, and the elders who are still there, that the sea will inundate the town. Be ready, therefore, in expectation of the coming of Arjuna, and when he quits Dwaraka, no longer abide there, but go whithersoever that descendant of Kuru shall repair. Do you also go to the son of Kuru and tell him that it is my request that he will grant what protection he can to all my family. Then depart with Arjuna and all the people of Dwaravati, and let Vajra be installed sovereign over the tribe of Yadu. Daruka, being thus instructed, prostrated himself again and again before Krishna and walked round him repeatedly, and then departed as he had been desired, and having conducted Arjuna to Dwaravati, the intelligent servant of Krishna established Vajra as king. The divine Govinda then, having concentrated in himself that supreme spirit, which is one with Vasudeva, was identified with all beings. As the traditional commentator on the Vishnu Purana says here, by the force of dhyana, or meditation, Krishna satisfied himself that he is Brahman, the universal spirit, that he is therefore all things, by which his individuality ceases. Respecting the words of the Brahman, the curse of Durvasas, the illustrious Krishna sat engaged in thought, resting one foot upon the knee of his other leg. This curse of Durvasas refers to them. It's mentioned again in the Mahabharata that the sage Durvasas was on one occasion hospitably entertained by Krishna, but some fragments of food fell onto the foot of the sage, and Krishna did not wipe his foot clean. And Durvasas therefore cursed Krishna to die by a wound of the foot. And so, respecting this, Krishna specifically sat and positioned his foot in such a way as to catch the arrow, to fulfill the words of the sage. Then came there a hunter named Jara, whose arrow was tipped with a blade made of the piece of the iron of the club, which had not been reduced to powder. And beholding from a distance the foot of Krishna, who put it there specifically, he mistook it for part of a deer, and shooting his arrow, lodged it in the sole of Krishna's foot. Approaching his mark, he saw the four-armed king, and falling at his feet, repeatedly besought his forgiveness, exclaiming, "I have done this deed unwittingly, thinking I was aiming at a deer. Have pity upon me, who am consumed by my crime, for you are to consume me." Bhagavan replied, "Fear you not in the least. Go, hunter, through my favor to heaven, the abode of the gods." As soon as he had thus spoken, a celestial chariot appeared, and the hunter ascending it forthwith proceeded to heaven. Then the illustrious Krishna, having united himself with his own pure, spiritual, inexhaustible, inconceivable, unborn, undecaying, imperishable, and universal spirit, which is one with Vasudeva, abandoned his mortal body and the condition of the three gunas. Chapter 38. This one will end book 5 of the Purana. Arjuna, having found the bodies of Krishna and of Rama, performed for them and the rest of the slain the obsequial rites. The 8 queens of Krishna who have been named, with Rukmini at their head, embraced the body of Hari and entered the funeral fire. Revati also, embracing the corpse of Rama, entered the blazing pyre, which was cool to her, happy in contact with her lord. Hearing these events, Ugrasena and Anakadundhabi, with Devaki and Rohini, committed themselves to the flames, men as well as women, all of the remaining Yadavas. The last ceremonies were performed for all these by Arjuna, who then made all the people leave the city and took Vajra with him. The sons of Kunti conducted the thousands of the wives of Krishna with Vajra and all the people from Dwaraka with tenderness and care, and traveled slowly away. The Sudharman palace and the Parijata tree, which had both been brought to earth by Krishna, both proceeded to heaven. And on the same day that Hari departed from the earth, the powerful dark Kali Yuga descended. The ocean rose and submerged the whole of Dwaraka, except alone the dwelling of the deity of the race of Yadu. The sea has not yet been able to wash that temple away, and there Keshava constantly abides even in the present day. Whoever visits that holy shrine, the place where Krishna pursued his leelas, is liberated from all his sins. The son of Pritha, Arjuna, halted the people he had brought from Dwaraka and the Panchanada country in a rich and fertile spot. But the desires of the robbers of the neighborhood were excited when they observed so many widowed females, also such great riches, in the possession of Arjuna alone. In other words, protected by only one protector. Inflamed by their lust, they assembled the villainous Abhira and said to them, "Here is this Arjuna, immensely rich and having numerous women whose husbands have been slain, passing confidently amongst us, a disgrace to such brave men as we. His pride is raised by the death of Bhishma, Drona, Jayadratha, Karna, and others whom he has slain. He does not know the prowess of simple villagers. Up, up, take you long, thick staves, this stupid fellow despises us. Why should we not lift up our arms?" So saying, they rushed, armed with cudgels and clods of earth, upon the people who were without their lord. Arjuna encountered them and said to them in derision, "Retire, wretches, ignorant of what is right, unless you are desirous of dying." But they disregarded his menaces and seized his treasures and his women, the wives of Vishvaksena. Therefore Arjuna began to brace his heavenly bow Gandiva, irresistible in battle, but it was in vain, for in spite of all his efforts to tighten it, the bowstring continued flaccid. Neither could he call to recollection the incantations of the superhuman weapons. Losing all patience, he launched as best he might his shafts upon the enemy, but those shot from Gandiva merely scratched the skin. The arrows given him by Agni to carry certain destruction now were themselves destroyed, and were fatal to Arjuna in his contest with herdsmen, or would be if he forced them, that they were self-destructing and not functioning properly. He endeavored to recall the might of Krishna, animated by which his numerous arrows had overthrown mighty kings, but he tried in vain, for now they were put aside by the peasants, or they flew at random wide of their aim. His arrows being expended, he beat the bandits with the horn of his bow, but they only laughed at his blows, and the barbarians, in the sight of Arjuna, carried off all the women of the Vrishni and Andhaka tribes and went their way. Then Jishnu, a name of Arjuna, was sorely distressed and lamented bitterly, exclaiming, "Alas, alas, I am deserted by my lord." And he wept, and in that instant the bow and heavenly weapons, his chariots and steeds, perished entirely, like a donation to an unlearned Brahman. "Resistless," said he, "are the decrees of fate, by whom feebleness has been inflicted upon me, deprived of my illustrious friend, and victory given to the base. These two arms are mine. Mine is this fist. This is my place. I am Arjuna, but without that righteous aid, all these are pitiless. The valor of Arjuna, the strength of Bhima was all his work, and without him I am overcome by peasants. It cannot be from any other cause." So saying, Arjuna went to the city of Mathura, and there installed the Yadava prince Vajra as king there. There he beheld Vyasa, who was living in a nearby wood, and he approached the sage and saluted him respectfully. The Muni surveyed him for some time as he lay prostrate at his feet, and said to him, "How is it that I see you thus shorn of your luster? Have you been guilty of illicit intercourse with women, or of the death of a Brahmin? Or have you suffered some grievous disappointment that you are so dejected? Have your prayers for progeny or other good gifts proved fruitless? Or have you indulged improper passions that your luster is so dim? Or are you one that devours the meal he has given to the Brahmins? Say, Arjuna, have you seized upon the substance of the poor? Has the wind of the winnowing basket lighted upon you, or has an evil eye gazed upon you, Arjuna, that you look thus miserable? Have you been touched by the water of a fingernail, or has the water of a water jar sprinkled you? Or, what is most probably the case, have you been beaten by your inferiors in battle?" Arjuna, having sighed deeply, related to Vyasa all the circumstances of his discomfiture, and continued, "Hari, who was our strength, our might, our heroism, our prowess, our prosperity, our brightness, has left us and departed. Deprived of him, our friend, illustrious and ever kindly speaking, we have become as feeble as if made of straw. Purushottama, who was the living vigor of my weapons, my arrow and my bow, is gone. As long as we looked upon him, fortune, fame, wealth, and dignity never abandoned us, but Govinda is gone from amongst us. That Krishna has quitted the earth, through whose power Bhishma, Drona, the kings of Anga, Duryodhana, and the rest were consumed. Not I alone, but earth has grown old, miserable, and lusterless. In the absence of the holder of the discus, Krishna, through devotion to whom Bhishma and other mighty men perished like moths in the flame of my valor, is gone, and I am now overcome by cowherds. The bow Gandiva that was famed throughout the three worlds has been foiled since he has departed by the sticks of peasants. The myriads of women over whom I was lord have been carried off. By lord, he means I was protector. Have been carried off from me by thieves, armed but with cudgels. The whole household of Krishna, O Krishna, has been forcibly carried away by peasants, who with their staves have put my strength to shame. That I am shorn of my luster I do not marvel. It is wonderful that I live. Surely, grandsire, I alone am so shameless as to survive the stain of indignity inflicted by the vile." Vyasa replied to Arjuna and said, "Think no more, my son, of your disgrace. It does not become you to grieve. Know that time subjects all beings to similar vicissitude. Time affects the production and dissolution of all creatures. All that exists is founded on time. Know this, Arjuna, and retain your fortitude. Rivers, seas, mountains, the whole earth, gods, men, animals, trees, insects are all created, and all will be destroyed by time. Knowing that all this is the effect of time, be tranquil. These mighty works of Krishna, whatever they have been performed to relieve earth of its burdens, for this he has come down. Earth, oppressed by her load, has had recourse to the assembly of the immortals, and Janardana, who was one with time, descended on that account. This object has now been accomplished. All the kings who oppressed the earth are slain. The race of Vrishni and Andhaka is destroyed. No more remained for him to accomplish. Therefore has the Lord departed whither he pleased, his ends being all fulfilled. At the period of creation, the God of gods creates. In that duration he preserves, and at the end of all, he is mighty to annihilate. Now all is done. Therefore, Arjuna, be not afflicted by the defeat. The prowess of mortals is the gift of time. Bhishma, Karna, and other kings have been slain by you alone. This was the work of time. And why, therefore, should not your discomfiture by those less than you are occur? In like manner as through your devotion to Vishnu these were overthrown by you, so at last has your defeat by miserable thieves been wrought by time. That divinity, assuming various bodies, preserves the world, and in the end the Lord of creatures destroys it. In the birth of thy fortunes, Janardana was thy friend, and their decline, their enemies have been favored by Keshava. Who would have believed that you should slay all the descendants of Kuru and kindred of Ganga? Who would have believed that peasants should triumph over you? Be assured, son of Prita, that it is but the sport of the universal Hari, that the Kauravas have been destroyed by you, and that you have been defeated by herdsmen. With respect to the women whom you lament, and who have been carried off by the thieves, hear from me an ancient story which will explain why this happened. In former times, a Brahmana named Ashtavakra was pursuing his religious penances, standing in water and meditating on the eternal spirit for many years. In consequence of the overthrow of the Asuras, there was a great festival on the summit of Mount Meru. On their way to it, Rambha, Tilottama, and hundreds and thousands of beautiful nymphs saw the ascetic Ashtavakra, and they praised and hymned him for his devotions. They bowed down before him and eulogized him as he was immersed up to his throat in water, his hair twisted in a braid. So they sang in honor of him whatever they thought would be most agreeable to that most eminent of Brahmanas. Ashtavakra at last said to them, I am well pleased with you, illustrious damsels. Whatever you wish for, ask of me, and I will give it to you, however difficult it may be of attainment. Then all those Apsaras, Rambha, Tilottama, and others, recorded in the Vedas, replied, It is enough for us that you are pleased. What need we aught else, venerable Brahmin? But some amongst them said, If, exalted sir, you are indeed pleased with us, then grant us a husband, the best of men and sovereign of the Brahmins. So be it, replied Ashtavakra, and thereupon came up from the waters. When the Apsaras beheld him coming out of the water and saw that his body was very ugly and crooked in 8 places, that he was severely deformed and crippled, they could not restrain their derision, but laughed aloud in mockery. The Muni was very angry and cursed them and said, Since you have been so impertinent as to laugh at my deformity, I denounce upon you this imprecation. Through the grace I have shown unto you, you shall obtain the first of males, the Adipurusha, for your husband. But in consequence of my curse, you shall afterwards fall into the hands of thieves. When the Apsaras heard this uttered by the Muni, they endeavored to appease him, and they so far succeeded that he announced to them they should finally return thereafter to the sphere of the gods. It is in consequence of the curse of the Muni Ashtavakra that these women who were at first the wives of Keshava have now fallen into the hands of the barbarians. And there is no occasion, Arjuna, for you to regret it in the least. All this destruction has been effected by the Lord of all, and your end is also nigh at hand, since he has withdrawn from you strength, splendor, valor, and preeminence. Death is the doom of everyone who is born. Fall is the end of exaltation. Union terminates in separation, and growth leads but to decay. Knowing all this, the wise are susceptible to neither grief nor joy, and those who learn their ways are even as they are, equally free from pleasure and pain. Do you, therefore, most excellent prince, understand this truth, and along with your brothers relinquish everything, and repair to the holy forest. Go now, and say from me to Yudhishthira, that he tomorrow with his brethren should tread the path of heroes. The path of heroes being the path of death, to leave this world. Thus instructed by Vyasa, Arjuna went and related to the other sons of Prita all that he had seen and experienced and had heard. When he had communicated to them the message of Vyasa, the sons of Pandu placed Parikshit on the throne and went to the forest. I have thus narrated to you, Maitreya, in detail, the actions of Vasudeva when he was born in the race of Yadu. And that is the end of the 5th book of the Vishnu Purana. There is a 6th book, but we can start on that one next time.
Wow, awesome. Thank you, Devlin.
Thank you all very much for coming.
I have a question.
Sure.
If I may.
Yeah, yes.
Well, God, I mean, a lot of questions come up in those kind of books, chapters that we just read.
Yeah.
One was what are these missiles that they always talk about in
yes. So the word is astra, being translated from Sanskrit. Divine missiles, weapons of devas. So for example, they mentioned the missile of Agni Astra. They are mantras that can be invoked into an arrow. So like you would draw an ordinary arrow, or we even have accounts of people using it with a reed of grass or like whatever physical object. The Astra mantra, if chanted over it, invokes the weapon of the deva, and causes it to, for example, you could simply shoot an ordinary arrow or throw a blade of grass. If you had invoked Agni Astra into it, it will set its target on fire, and so on. These mantras are given originally by the devas themselves, but there are lineages of gurus of Dhanurveda, or the Vedic warfare, who passed them down, like Kripacharya and Dronacharya, who taught them to people like Arjuna and the other Pandavas, and so on. Yeah. So
amazing. Then and then towards the end of this the book 5, of course, and the whole story is this example of Arjuna's weapons not working all of a sudden.
Yes.
A couple days after, a little bit after, a couple weeks, whatever, after the yuga shifts, Krishna leaves his body.
Yes.
So here's my question about that is, even here now, deep into Kali Yuga that we are, theoretically, we still have access to these divine weapons.
Theoretically.
From what I understand. But then, according to the illustration of Arjuna, after Krishna has just left his body, and here we are, 5,300 years later, or whatever it is. I mean, like, I guess what I'm getting at is, wouldn't someone like Arjuna, like a numero uno devotee like Arjuna, wouldn't he still have really, really direct access to the cities that Krishna gave him? But it doesn't. But according to that illustration, he didn't. According to that illustration, they just dropped. They dropped.
Yes.
What do you think was missing? Because according to what I understand, Chaitanya and whoever would tell us that we have those. We could easily fend off those peasants and actually pull armies here today in 2023 with our bhakti and our connection, right? And Krishna, integrating Krishna into a situation, basically.
Sure.
From what I understand. But
Krishna,
even with Mr. Arjuna here, Shri Arjuna couldn't fend off peasants with his divine weapons.
Krishna always actually, throughout Mahabharata, even after the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes various sort of wry comments criticizing Arjuna for lack of devotion.
What? Really?
Yeah, he really does, actually. More than once, Krishna mentions that Arjuna was a poor student of the Bhagavad Gita. That even after the revelation of the Gita to him, he remarks that Arjuna never had Sharanagati, never actually had surrendered to Krishna. That even as he heard the Gita, he was doubting it. And indeed, even in the following days, right after the Gita was spoken directly by Krishna to Arjuna, in the Mahabharata, Arjuna explicitly doubts some of what Krishna told him, and like falls back into some of the same conundrums and dilemmas that Krishna just spelled out the resolutions for to him. Arjuna was inconsistent. He definitely had moments of very high Sakya Bhakti, or devotion through a friendship type relation with Krishna. But his ego was such that Arjuna always had a very hard time revering anything as above him. Even his bhakti was Sakya Bhakti, that he related to Krishna like a friend to a friend as an equal. And he would have moments of bowing to him as a lord, but he didn't ever maintain it consistently. And so his use of the astras was not with devotion ever. It was essentially driven with like this fiery pride in his own and ego in his own possession of them. And so long as Krishna was cool with that, and Krishna allowed him to still use them, but indeed he was not Arjuna in that birth was not a sage of steady devotion and steady yogic concentration that could make those things work consistently without Krishna's grace helping him.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing.
Yes, Mary, that is also true, that the curse of Ashtavakra had to be fulfilled in this case. And so for that reason, also Krishna temporarily withdrew the potency of the weapons and also Arjuna's strength. Keep in mind that at this time, they were all over 100 years old. Arjuna himself was also a very old man at the time. And
was that old? How old was an average life then?
This was that was getting old. This is, at the very start of, the very end of Dvapara Yuga going into Kali. It's a gradual change. So they were very old. So yeah, a great deal of this had been running on the grace of Krishna for some time. And also Krishna's presence physically in the world in a way made people reliant on that and not having the sort of more abstract devotional connection that devotees of Krishna might have now.
Oh, wow.
Such that it was kind of like a crutch being removed when Krishna's avatarana suddenly ended. That his presence on the earth directly caused such a infusion of energy that perhaps the same connection could be made by more spiritual means, and indeed it for sure can. But that's not really how people like Arjuna had been doing it. They had been connecting to his energy as their friend in a body. They are talking to them. They weren't really used to connecting with him in a more spiritual way.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And we're about to go into, then we start going into the Srimad Bhagavatam situation in a minute here with the Parikshit on the throne now.
Yes, exactly. They installed Parikshit on the throne. And indeed, more than once it had been mentioned by Parashara throughout the Vishnu Purana, speaking to his student Maitreya, that at the time of that conversation of Parashara and Maitreya, Parikshit is currently king. And has not even had children yet. Parikshit is a young king. And the revelation of the Srimad Bhagavatam by Shukadeva to Parikshit is many years in the future, as of when this conversation occurred.
How old was he when what we just read took place, him taking the throne?
Parikshit, I think he was like 30 or early 30s.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks so much, David. Haribol.
Haribol.